Not only God knows, I know, and by the end of the semester, you will know. These were the words of Sydney Coleman, the physicist's physicist, a man whose name might not carry the household weight of Einstein or Hawking, but whose intellectual shadow looms over the very foundations of modern quantum theory. Coleman, a jovial legend at Harvard, was known for his electric enthusiasm and legendary lectures, yet behind his wit lay a discovery that was truly spine-chilling. In the late 1970s, Coleman figured out how to destroy the entire universe. He revealed that the vacuum we inhabit, the seemingly empty space that makes up the vastness of the cosmos, might not be the stable foundation we assume it to be, but rather a false vacuum, a temporary state of energy that could, at any moment, collapse. One could always try to find stoic comfort in the idea that a new vacuum might sustain some form of structure or joy, but Coleman's math eventually eliminated even that sliver of hope. He discovered that our universe is under a constant, unforgiving threat. At any point in time and space, reality could begin to unravel in a way that nothing could survive. This story pulls us deep into the bizarre world of the standard model of particle physics and introduces us to the one particle that sits apart from all others, the God particle, or as its creator once jokingly called it, the goddamn particle. To understand this cosmic fragility, we must first look back at the men and women who peeled back the layers of reality, starting with the aftermath of the most destructive human invention, the atomic bomb. On July 16, 1945, as the Trinity test mushroom cloud bloomed, Kenneth Bainbridge turned to Robert Oppenheimer and uttered the immortal phrase, "Now we're all sons of bitches." The success of the Manhattan Project brought a flurry of adrenaline, followed by a sour, deep unease among the world's greatest minds. Richard Feynman, who had initially celebrated by playing his iconic bongos on the hood of a Jeep, soon found himself sitting in New York restaurants, looking at buildings and bridges, thinking about the radius of destruction and how useless it all seemed because people simply didn't understand the power that had been unleashed. The project had employed over 130,000 people and involved 26 past or future Nobel Prize winners, serving as the focal point for physics for half a decade. In 1947, these physicists gathered at Shelter Island to return to science for science's sake, finally able to talk without the shadow of military clearance over their shoulders. It was here that Feynman and Julian Schwinger proposed groundbreaking ideas that would lead us down to the ultimate building blocks of reality. To a physicist, the world is written in the language of the Standard Model, a century-long effort to decipher the laws of the universe. At the base are the fermions, the quarks and leptons that make up matter, named after Enrico Fermi. Quarks feel the strong force and bind together to form the protons and neutrons at the core of your atoms, while leptons, like the electron, ignore that force entirely. Complementing these are the bosons, named after Satyendra Nath Bose, which act as the carriers of the fundamental forces. The gluon carries the strong force, the photon carries electromagnetism, and the W and Z bosons carry the weak force. But particles aren't really particles in the way we imagine them. They are ripples in quantum fields that fill all of space. Every electron is a ripple in the electron field, and every photon is a ripple in the photon field. If you think of temperature in a room as a scalar field where every point has a number, you can begin to visualize how these fields work. Some are more complex vector fields with both a number and a direction, like magnetic fields. The real power lies in how these fields interact. When two electrons approach each other, they don't just feel each other, their presence in the electron field generates a ripple in the photon field, which transfers energy and momentum. This is what we call a force. This quantum picture, refined by Feynman, Schwinger, and Tominaga, showed how everything in the universe should be massless, yet we clearly have mass, which pointed to a massive hole in the theory. This brings us to the weak force, which can flip the identities of quarks and leptons and is responsible for radioactivity. Unlike the massless photon, the W and Z bosons of the weak force are incredibly heavy, 80 times more massive than a proton. This mass limits the weak force's range to less than a millionth of a billionth of a meter because of Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, which dictates that such high energy can only be borrowed from the vacuum for a fraction of a second. The quest to find the origin of this mass leads us to Peter Higgs, the J.D. Salinger of physics, who famously skipped his own Nobel Prize announcement in 2013 to eat soup and trout at a local pub. To understand his contribution, we look at the 1979 Nobel ceremony where Abdus Salam, Sheldon Glashow, and Weinberg were honored for unifying electromagnetism and the weak force into the electro-weak theory. This unification followed the legacy of James Clerk Maxwell, who first showed that electricity and magnetism were two sides of the same coin. Physicists love symmetry, the idea that laws stay the same even when you transform your view. Emmy Noether, a mathematical genius hailed by Einstein, proved that every symmetry corresponds to a conservation law, like the conservation of energy. The electro-weak theory relied on complex symmetries called U1 and SU2, but these symmetries predicted that all particles should be massless. Something must have happened in the early hot universe to break this symmetry as it cooled. This is where the Higgs field comes in, a simple scalar field that fills the vacuum. Imagine the early universe a picosecond after the Big Bang. All fields were buzzing with energy. As the cosmos cooled, most fields settled to zero, but the Higgs field got hung up. While other fields are like a pendulum that eventually stops at zero, the Higgs field is like a pencil balancing on its tip that falls over, losing its symmetry but gaining a non-zero value everywhere in space. This vacuum expectation value makes space sticky for particles. Massless photons don't interact with it, so they move at the speed of light. But electrons and quarks feel this stickiness, which we perceive as inertial mass, the resistance to being pushed. However, the Higgs only accounts for about 1% of your mass. The rest comes from the swirling energy of gluons and quarks inside your protons, governed by Einstein's E equals mc squared. This brings us back to Sydney Coleman's warning. In 2012, 5 years after Coleman's death, the Large Hadron Collider at CERN, led by Lynn Evans, finally detected the Higgs boson. By measuring the mass of the Higgs and comparing it to the top quark, physicists found something alarming. If the ratio of their masses was below 36%, the universe would be stable. If it was above 42%, it would have collapsed instantly at birth. Instead, the ratio is approximately 38%, meaning the Higgs field is metastable. It is stuck in a local minimum, like a ball trapped in a dip on a mountainside, rather than the true valley floor. Quantum mechanics allows for tunneling, where a wave-like particle can leak through a barrier. This means there is a non-zero probability that the Higgs field could suddenly transition to a lower energy state. If this happens, a bubble of true vacuum would materialize and expand at the speed of light, incinerating everything in its path. Inside the bubble, the laws of physics would change, the masses of particles would shift, and atoms would likely cease to exist. Space itself might collapse. While the probability is low and might not happen in billions of years, it remains a game of chance. As Coleman noted, the possibility of any structure capable of knowing joy surviving this transition has been eliminated. We are living on the edge of a cosmic cliff, held up by a field that hasn't quite finished falling yet.